where you mentioned Amazon, and maybe I'm an idealist, and I admit this is a future visionary type thing, but you can at least imagine something similar to the Amazon compute structure, to where, yeah, you don't control their hardware, you don't have a visibility, but you can go reserve a certain amount of compute and say, and they have this long list of rules, here's all the rules you have to meet if you want to get a job in and get a job out. And look how much of the world is using Amazon compute. You could see a future where the network is like that, where you there's a set of rules, but you go in and you can use connectivity between cities or data centers, and when you're done, you can take it out and you pay for the usage. So that would be the dream or the endpoint that could be SDN longer term, but I definitely agree that shorter term, you have to work with what's there. You certainly can't tear anything out. And I think the good stepping stone is basically sockets into what's already there with an external controller able to make requests, but not necessarily able to take down a node.
And or perhaps direct control, right? I mean, that's the thing I think we're talking about here. It's relatively easy for us to abstract that. You know, we did a couple of government programs that were moving 100 nodes, 100 wavelengths in 100 milliseconds. That was kind of the goal, to move that traffic around. And physically it was possible. Doing it in any kind of practice was nearly impossible. But then we started looking at sub-bandwidth management. Well, that made a lot of sense because not everything has to move 100G wavelengths around, or going forward even larger pipes. Right. There's not going to be perhaps that much demand for this, especially as we start out, or at least I wouldn't imagine so. I mean, those are still really big pipes. Maybe the right way to do this is to start at the electrical layer, saying I've got these, SONET and or SDH or OTN switches that are going into the network. They're much easier to control because the paths are defined, the amount of bandwidth is defined, and there's relatively common language to get at them. And
they're a switch.
Yeah, they're a switch. You need to have a switch in order to have anything to control. To make it dynamic. Yeah. And that's why we're saying at the photonic layer, we're still a bit early, right? We don't have these CDC ROADMs in place.
Or even if we do, there's so much complexity in determining what's a viable switch. And I mean, I can switch it, but will the light get out on the other end and be detected?
Am I going to do it in 49 seconds? I don't know.
Because I can do the switching and the control, and it's colorless and directionless, but I have to pre-configure to make sure that whatever you're going to switch to is a viable connection.
Yeah, there's a there's a receiver at the other end, and this transmitter was able to reach it.
We're able to reach it.
Without any regens in between.
Exactly.
I mean, this is, we had pretty much solved that regen problem at 10 gig, now we're going to 100 gig, and actually it's working pretty darn good, right, for distance. Now we keep talking about, well, let's go to 16 QAM or, higher modulation formats, distance gets shorter. Once you start adding regens back into that picture, the
expense.
It blows it up, right? I mean, it just gets too complicated to say, this path I can reach, this path I cannot. And some of the ideas of this optical modem is that we're going to somehow dial all the parameters that we've got now, on this new transmitter receiver pair, and that gets to be a pretty far out program. That's more of a science project right now, I would say.
It does.
Because really you're talking about somehow I need to know what the resources I've actually got, when they're going to be available, and then how do I alarm them and manage them.
Well, and the reason we have such a different nature in the optical layer is the fact that we're pushing the edges of our margins. If I wanted to shorten everything to where everything could reach anywhere, you couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
Because I'd be throwing in regens everywhere. Right. But if I'm going to give you the maximum reach so that this connection is as low a cost as I can get, then you might not be able to switch it a longer route on a restoration path without a regen.